Good morning. This is Bill from Europa, Naples, and today I've got a lovely, crisp Florida summer morning. We've got a front blowing in. There's clouds in the sky. There's a little bit of a breeze. It's just super, super nice. And that's rare because usually it's hot and miserable on these mornings, and it makes me miserable. But today I'm happy, and I'm happy for another reason. I have this fantastic 1964 Studebaker Avanti. Every once in a while we get some old cars in, and frankly, most of them scare the living hell out of me. I have to drive them home, they break down, they quit, they won't hot start, they won't cold start, and it's just an absolute treat when you get one that drives like a new car. And this one does, and there's good reason for it. Again, this is a 1964, and it has just 7,000 miles on the clock. This thing has been in a collection, virtually since it was current. The original owner was, somebody who really didn't drive it very much, and, then it went on to a collector after that. He drove it almost never and kept it for decades. And then a couple of years ago, a good friend of mine and a customer, he bought it out of his collection from the poor widow and ended up with it. And now we've got it, and it is for sale. Studebaker is a pretty historical car company. It's one of the few companies that could sort of date its roots back to the pre-Revolutionary War. It wasn't founded then. It came out in like 1852. But the original Studebaker came over from Germany in, like 1740, and started making wagons and farm implements and such. And then his descendants went on to make wagons and farm implements and such, and they became pretty successful at it. And that led to a Studebaker wagon company founded in the mid-19th century, which supplied, wagons to farmers, and then got a military contract and grew pretty exponentially from there. Their first car was in 1902. It was electric. They went on to build gas cars. They went on to build cars for gangsters. And they became known as a maker of cars that were reliable, luxurious, extraordinarily well built, and just fantastic all around. But by 1960, the company had fallen on hard times. It was kind of a little company, compared to the big three. Trying to keep up with Ford and Chevy wasn't that simple. So, they were really down on their luck. A deal with Packard had just fallen through, a merger that went south. So a guy named Egbert, Sherwood Egbert, that's a name you can take to the bank. He was the head of Studebaker at the time, and he hired a guy named Raymond Lowry to create a car that would save Studebaker, that would, propel them forward and bring them up to current and, make people really lust after them. So he did just that. He doodled a car on a flight from Chicago to Indiana or wherever the hell he was going. I know Studebaker's in Indiana, South Bend. And then hired Raymond Lowry to put a team together to put it together. And they did put it together in record time, absolutely record time, like 5 months from design to approval to the beginning of production. And they planned to sell 20,000 of them the first year. They were going to compete with the Riviera, the Thunderbird, and of course the Corvette. But that did not fall through because even though the the design team really went outside their heads and made one of the most incredible cars of all time, the production team just couldn't get it done. So that first year, only 1,200 were made. A bunch of people backed out of their orders. And overall, they just didn't sell that many of these cars. And for many, many years, these things have been an unbelievable value in the collector car market. I think I'm zooming again here. Anyway. They go for surprisingly little money for as rare and as important as they are. For instance, this is just one of 809 1964 models. 809. I mean, that's, again, about how many Camrys they stamp out in a couple of days. There were a few more 63s, although none were built in 64, by the way. They were built in 62 and 63 and marketed as 63 and 64 models. Anyway, back to this car. So, you know, even though it was a really, really fantastic, forward-thinking car full of incredible modern design features and, you know, really improved safety features over most of the other cars on the road, it just didn't work. Studebaker collapsed, and, you know, they sort of divided themselves up into different pieces. You know, and then no fewer than 5 different companies took over, you know, the Avanti rights and started building these things over the year, all the way through the 80s, even into the 90s, I believe. So, you know, there have been some sort of Avantis being built for decades and decades, but there's only so many originals, and this is one of those. So, you know, you can see the design of the car is absolutely amazing. Look at those razor edge fenders. Also the way that the parking lamps are integrated into the front of them. That's just something that wasn't done then. There's a grillless front end. You can see the air intake is underneath the bumper. You know, again, very unusual for the time. You've got a forward hinged hood with an asymmetrical scoop on the left-hand side. The square lights, by the way, are one of the ways to determine the 64s. It's not the only way, because there were some round headlamp 64s, but you know, most 64s had those square headlights, and the earlier ones were all round. Now, the thing is made out of fiberglass because the way it was designed, it was to be a Coke bottle, sort of wasp-waisted shape. You see it bulges out at the front, goes in at the middle, comes bulging out at the end again. That would have been very difficult to make out of steel, so Studebaker went with fiberglass, and they hired the company that was making the fiberglass for the original Corvettes. You know, that didn't go well. They really botched it up. The order went south and haywire, so Studebaker had to move the fiberglass making in-house, which was another reason for the delay, which was another reason they just didn't make that many Avantis. Anyway, what a design. What an incredible looking design. Here's a neat one for you. The wheel well arches are designed to look like the Sputnik's re-entry pattern. So, you know, very cool little subtle detail there. You can see the incredible shape of the windows. It's, again, a 4-seat GT car. The Sputnik. God, I just love Sputnik. I think that has to be the coolest thing. Incredible big back window, very reminiscent of the Jensen Interceptor. Bobtail rear, excuse me, bobtail rear end with wraparound taillights. Again, also sort of integrated into the body. That flush stuff is just something they didn't do for years and years after that. This is one of the first cars with big backup reverse lights. You can see big dual exhaust down there. What almost looks like a modern diffuser underneath. You know, they did almost no wind tunnel testing on this car, and when I say almost, what I mean is 0. So, you know, they had no way to know if it was slippery or not, and slippery it was. In fact, it had an incredible, you know, drag coefficient for the time, and coupled to its high-performance engine, the thing was fast as hell. It set like 29 records at the Bonneville Salt Flats. There were 3 different levels of engines, the R1, the R2, the R3. The R3 had a couple of superchargers on it, put over 500 horsepower out, and that thing just ate up the Salt Flats in an incredible way. Anyway, just look at this thing. I mean, this thing is just so cool. This drip rail was added on the 64 models. It's another way to distinguish. A little recessed door there for the gas cap. Recessed door handles. Again, just not done on other cars at the time. And very, very cool all around. So anyway, let's start in the trunk. Now, to release the trunk, there's an inner release down here, sort of Porsche style. No key at the back at all, which I think is kind of cool. Have a look in here. So there it is, nice sized trunk. You can see, again, I've got my bag of stuff. This is an interesting feature, this recessed spare tire well. Again, giving you all your trunk room with the tire underneath. You know, a lot of times in these cars, you had, you know, big tires mounted at the side, sort of almost like an afterthought. This thing wasn't. It was put in such a way as to not go down properly. Oh, I'm sure it's fine. Anyway, you know, small opening but big trunk. You're going to fit a lot of stuff in there, and everyone's going to be real happy. Now, you see that little door on the package shelf? That was another neat feature. That was access to the trunk through the passenger compartment. Again, just something you don't really see. That would have been really convenient in Goodfellas when Ray Liotta and De Niro and Pesci are driving down the road, and that maid guy they thought they killed was making noise in the trunk. Liotta could have just turned around, opened up that little thing there, and capped him without having to get out of the car. They could have just kept moving. Anyway, let's have a look under the hood. All right, so again, forward hinged hood, which is pretty damn cool. And I love those fender mirrors. And here it is. That is a factory chrome kit. That's the way these cars came. This is a 289 cubic inch Studebaker motor called the Jet Thrust. Everything was pretty much space age at this point in time, sort of space program and whatnot inspired. So anyway, very, very original under here. The chrome is all stunning. I love the little STP oil filter ads there on the air valve cover breathers. The orange fan, all very, very cool. Just a lovely under hood here. And again, this thing was a pretty much a hot rod. It had 10 1/4 to 1 compression, Carter 4-barrel carburetor, a little bit of a hot cam, put out about 240 horse, which was great for 1964, and was a very tried and true Studebaker motor already. It wasn't, like a fresh design. This was a company in financial trouble, so they had to recycle motors. But they picked the right one. This thing's a bit of a rocket ship. I'll go around to the other side. And there you see something that's pretty damn cool, and that is a air conditioning compressor. This one does have that option. Also has power steering, which is nice. And that, here you go. Some of these things were supercharged. So the R2 engine added a little Paxton supercharger off the side, and the R3 engine added 2 of them. But, even though that's pretty cool and it makes it faster and it makes it, sort of more peppy, it does do away with the ability to have air conditioning. So if I had to have my choice, I'm going with the AC. This thing actually has pretty great AC that chills you down nicely. So anyway, you can see everything just lovely under there. I don't know if I'll be able to get down where you can see the frame. Maybe. Anyway, you can see that this is Studebaker number 5379, R5379, very late in the serial model range, and a true 64 model. This little hinge here is right out of an 84 Corvette, earlier even. Lovely way the hood closes. Look at those bumpers. I mean, what the hell looks like that? Absolutely nothing. Avanti, of course, being Italian for forward, there really should be an exclamation point after that. All right, let's have a look inside. So the inside of this thing is all original, unrestored, the way it came from the factory. Those are not new seat covers or door panels or wood grain. Again, this is 100% original on the 7,000-mile car. Actually, it does have a working interior light, which I popped the bulb out earlier because it was kind of screwing out the photos. So I'll put that back in. But even the interior lights all work. You can see the fit and finish is absolutely gorgeous. And of course, that's something that Studebaker was famous for, is they built very high quality cars. The back seats, lovely. This has the pleated leather, the Regal leather option it's called. Really stands out, really looks nice, and it's just absolutely mint back there. Ditto the package shelf, and that incredible pleated headliner, absolutely cool. Now you see that sort of structural looking thing going across there. That is an actual genuine roll bar that Studebaker put in these cars as sort of an advanced safety feature. Another safety feature on this thing is that it had front disc brakes. They claimed it was the first American car to have front disc brakes, which it really wasn't. The Chrysler Imperial was. But they weren't really modern disc brakes on the Imperial the way they are on this. This is a true caliper on disc system, power assisted, and it did really help the car stop a little bit quicker than some of its competitors. Studebaker was also the distributor for Mercedes-Benz at the time, and they did pick up some stuff from them. For instance, these structural door latches. I mean, this looks like it's straight out of a Benz model. You can see the hard steel pointer there going into this, frame-mounted receptacle, and that becomes a very sturdy latch Mercedes style, and is just something that wasn't on other cars. It also has a second gear start, which is another Mercedes feature. So unless you put the gear shift down into first and make it manually go into first gear, this thing is going to launch from the lights in second gear, makes it smoother, quieter. You're only going to feel one shift. And that's just kind of another, little thing they robbed from Mercedes. This one also does have seat belts, lovely. I love the little low slung buckets. They look like they're out of a Cobra or something, but they are pretty comfy. And all the chrome, all the fit and finish, the switches, the Studebaker emblem. It's just so damn cool. Really, really attractive to look at, and a terrific color combination. All right, let's hop in. See if I can get the seat back some. I don't know if it moves. I don't think it does. Well, if it doesn't, we'll just keep it where it is. Okay, here you can see a beautifully laid out instrument cluster. Now, I believe these are Stuart Warner gauges, but don't hold me to it. And there are a bunch of them. You've got an analog clock over there. You've got your water temp, your amperes, your miles per hour, 140 on there. There you see just the set. That is not 107. That is 7,000 miles on this thing. There's a tach with the 5,000 RPM red line, your fuel gauge, your oil pressure, and even a vacuum gauge there, which I suppose was more important in the supercharged models. This guy runs your wipers here. This did have true variable speed wipers. You got your turn signal indicators. Look at the beautiful Bakelite steering wheel and the way they've inlaid the horn buttons into those. Just very, very cool. Also beautiful Bakelite in the top. I mean, again, very modern style to have the vinyl here with the Bakelite. That's a lot of cars do that now with the wood, but Studebaker had it here. Here's the speaker for the radio. It's got kind of an old guy compass. I don't know if it came with that or not. I doubt it. Either way, that's 50 years old and looks great up there. This is very, very cool. This full rear view mirror. I love the way the glass just goes to the edge. And you see this little guy, day and night, N-I-T-E. I guess that was cheaper than putting in the GH. But I mean, what an interesting and cool little feature to be able to spin that around and, dim your mirror. Now, Egbert was a bit of an aviation fan, so Lowry put in some aircraft-style switches up here. And not only do they look like aircraft-style switches with the overhead compartment type thing, they work like it. So, this is the parking lights. That's the headlights. Instrument cluster. This is sort of dim. This is brighter. And then you've got your fan control stuff up there. Very, very cool. Also, these incredibly cool little sun visors where my detailer didn't bother to wipe them down. I understand these padded visors are almost impossible to find used. These are original mint, and they should be, for you Studebaker guys out there, you'll know what you're looking at. That is a testament to the incredible originality of this car. All right, down here you've got Studebaker's in-dash. I think it's an AM/FM push button, but I haven't quite figured out how to get the FM yet. It does work fine. I don't know. I'm not going to start it up yet. Let's just keep going. I ran through it, got some noise out the speaker. I was listening to the news on the way in, and works pretty good. You can see below it, those are the vents for the air conditioning. You can see the evaporators just right behind the vents. So you get this really ice cold air coming out of there that works surprisingly well for a 60s model. The controls there, this incredible set of rocker switches down here, or I don't know what you'd call them, some kind of switches that control all the vents. And I think I just turned the light on, and now it's off. Anyway, that was replaced in '64 with the little round knobs. It was Delta wings on earlier models. It looks like this one was built for Charles Rock Jr. So that's apparently the guy who who didn't drive it very much to begin with. Nice little, chrome shifter mechanism. Could be shifted manually. Very, very cool. You got an ashtray here. You got a little center console box with some spare parts in there. The glove box, very, very neat stuff. You can see 4 drink holders, so you can have a lot of beer. Drinking and driving was okay back then. And then this guy, a pull out, and I've got to reattach that mirror, which is kind of annoying that nobody noticed that until now. Anyway, that's my life. Oh God, some two-sided tape. Anyway, that little mirror that came out, it's sort of a makeup compartment, would also be a hell of a place for a compact 9mm. But this is just something you didn't see on other cars. Very, very cool. Try not to break that mirror as we close it. Anyway, everything nice in there. You see even the glove box light works. Just everything works on this car. And to drive it, let's do exactly that. All right, so fire it up. Doesn't that big 289 come to life? Here's our radio going.
The Special Counsel's Office argues that contact violated the conditions that were set for Manafort's release.
Oh, God, more of the Trump stuff. Anyway, all the gauges working nice, everything coming on to life, lovely, you know, nice, smooth running engine. Let's get ourselves in drive, go for a spin. If I want to kick the air on, just move that over, and I'm going to get some nice chilies coming out of there. So one of the cool things about driving this car was just how good it drives. And by that, again, I mean, I drive a lot of these old cars home, and I mean, some of them, they may look terrific, but they either drive like trucks or they just, you know, feel like they're rickety and coming apart. I feel like I know what it's like to drive a new Studebaker. Tracks down the road beautifully. The steering is light and precise, very, very nice. It's got a double wishbone up front, so nice independent suspension. Those disc brakes stopping at, I won't say on a dime, but they stop it great. No hesitation at all from the motor. That thing's just running like, you know, the day it was built. You hear those secondaries open. When I was a kid, we used to flip the air cleaner on our parents' old Impala to be able to make it sound like a cop car going down the road. You get into the secondaries on the 4-barrel. Let's hit it a little bit. Alright, so plenty of pep out of our Studebaker. And I mean, I don't know if it's sort of coming through in the video, but just how good this car drives. I mean, 2 fingers on the wheel, beautiful feel, no vibration, just tracks straight and smooth. The guy is very fresh, you know, vintage looking white walls on it, very proper, and everything's just lovely. So we're moving forward in our Studebaker into the future, and actually off to work where, you know, I get to have a miserable day putting out fires, but for the moment I'm happy in this thing and having a nice ride in. So there it is, one of the most incredible cars ever built, in my mind, a bargain collectible. I mean, these things should be worth a lot more than they are. This is a 64 Studebaker Avanti, 7,000 real miles on this thing. Again, one of 809 built this year, and it's just one of the finest examples of a 1960s car, if not the finest example of an unrestored car that I've seen. It's really just that nice. So look, if you have an interest, give us a call, 239-649-7300, on the web at mercedesexpert.com. Always happy to talk to you about this car or any other one of our